Okay, on to our study. We're on mercy tonight, our last of the 7 motivational gifts. And let me give you a heads up and a heads up to you in TV land there. We're glad you're here, glad you tune in, glad you watch. We're going to finish mercy tonight, and then we're going to take a vacation next Wednesday. Sue and I are going to get out of Dodge for a few days, get some R&R. I hope you support that. And so we're going to do that, and we'll take a break. When we come back 2 weeks from tonight, we'll start on the ministerial gifts. These are the gifts that God may call you to use your spiritual gift in. So that's where we'll pick up, and we'll have a new set of lessons then. But tonight, we're on mercy, so let's start talking about that. Mercy is identifying with and comforting those who are in distress. The Greek word is elko, and if you've studied a language, you know many of the foreign languages will have different versions of a word based upon gender, present tense, past tense, those. The main word here is elko, to feel sympathy with the misery of another, especially sympathy manifested in action. There's a book out, old book, long time ago, about Charles Schulz Peanuts cartoons that he did, and it's called The Gospel According to Peanuts. It's just a little paperback book, but one of them in there is Charlie Brown and Linus are inside the house, and it's snowing to beat the band, and they're looking out at Snoopy. Oh, poor Snoopy out there in the cold. Of course, Snoopy liked to sleep on top of his house. I guess he didn't know enough to get inside, but he's out there cold, shivering. We need to go cheer Snoopy up. So they go out. They go to Snoopy. Be of good cheer, Snoopy. And they turn around and go back in the house. They don't bring him food. They don't bring him water. They don't bring him a blanket. Making the point that we can do that sometimes with people. We don't really help their need. We just say, buck up. It'll change soon. Or, you can do it, and go on. Then we leave them in their misery. Having the gift of mercy is someone who will actually take action as they can to help a person in their misery. And so that's who they are. But elko is the Greek word for that. We got a couple of verses that highlight that. Jesus, this parable is talking about the Good Samaritan. When Jesus is telling that parable, and at the end, he goes to the expert in the law and asks who did the right thing, the priest or the one that stopped. And he says the one who had mercy on him, which is Elios, in that situation. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And that's a powerful parable. There's so much in there because it was a Samaritan. The Jews hated the Samaritans. They were seen as half-breeds. They're the ones that when Cyrus of Persia came in and conquered the land, he took some of the people, he took what they considered the cream of the crop to his land so they could intermarry his people, and he brought the dregs back to Palestine. And so the Jews hated them because they weren't pure blood. And that's where the lost tribes of Israel, I'm sure you've heard that all your life. They weren't really lost, we know where they went, but they did just end up being merged into society. They didn't return to their land. That's why we call them the lost. So this is that Good Samaritan where he stopped to help the person. The one the Jews, despite, I think it was 3 priests or 2 priests and a scribe, not only went by the man, they went to the far side of the road to get around. They didn't want to be near him. This man stopped, nursed his wounds, took him to an inn, paid for his coverage, for his room, for we don't know how long, took care of that. But he promised, I'll come back and I'll pay you. If that wasn't enough, I'll pay you the rest. Very generous spirit. And that's what Jesus said. Yes, he's the one that did right. And then he said, you go do the same thing. So then we get to the next one. Because judgment, from James 2:13, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over justice. We need justice. It's right for us to judge right and wrong, and for wrong to be punished. But under extenuating circumstances, we need to extend mercy. And if a person is truly repentant, truly wanting to change, whatever criteria we feel there, they've shown a right spirit, then we can be merciful and forego the judgment. But Jesus says here, to the one who doesn't show mercy, they're not going to get mercy. So that's another reason to be merciful. We need Jesus to be merciful to us. So those are two uses for the word of mercy. In both cases, it's acting on that mercy, doing something for the people to help them. So now we get into the attributes of a person with mercy. Possesses the capacity to feel the atmosphere of joy and distress in an individual or a group. So they're very discerning people, sensitive people to know what the situation is. They sense that, and they have that feeling. They're attracted to and understand those in distress. There are some people that seek that out. They want to help people. They're sympathetic to them. They want to ease their pain. See a strong desire to remove hurt and restore healing in others. So they're not one that just says, be of good cheer and go on their way. They want to help what it takes, food, listening, binding up wounds, whatever it is, to help that person. So they take action. They may have a greater concern for mental distress than physical distress. And, that is important. And there was at one time I heard more about it than I do now, reminding people that depression and other things is a disease, just like you can have a cancer in your body. It's not anything that can help. There is a physiological reason for some of it. There's certainly a traumatic reason for some of the things people go through. And when we see people out there in life, and we don't know necessarily what they've gone through. And some of y'all have shared with me what our friend that walks around and comes in every so often, what her childhood was like. And it gives us understanding. It may still drive us crazy, but it does give us understanding, which helps us be a little more merciful, helps me be a little more merciful. But it does, we do need to think about that mental distress. A lot of times it's easy to find help for the physical. You can go see a doctor, but that mental problem, that distress, that anguish that we go through, a lot of times people don't want to be around it. They just think, oh, you're just wallowing in self-pity. Well, sometimes people do, but there are some people that isn't the case. They need somebody to come alongside and help them up. And a person with the gift of mercy does that. They can avoid firmness unless they see clearly the benefit. So, sometimes we see what's going on in a person's life. They need to change. They need to take some definite steps. And sometimes they need a firm hand to get them on that. They need direct talk. But a person with the gift of mercy discerns when it's best to hold off on that and give help. We talked about that before, that very often people are hurting when people are in need. We need to take care of the problem as best we can, then help them along the right steps instead of just telling them they got to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and then walk away and take the attitude, when you get your life right, I'll come help you. They need help now. A person with the gift of mercy really is sensitive to that. They'll use firmness when necessary, but they can back off if they think that person needs space. So that's very important. Sensitive to words and actions that will hurt others. That's a very positive attribute. So often we don't realize how our words hurt, and we can be talking to a young mother who just had a miscarriage or lost a child and say something like, well, it must have been God's will. That doesn't really help, does it? We don't know. For one thing, we have no idea what we're talking about. But to kind of blame that on God is a shame, and that doesn't help them. And you know, as I know, in many cases when somebody's hurting and needs help, they don't need talk. They just need somebody to be there. They just need companionship. They'll talk if they want to talk, and we just give them that space. But a person with the gift of mercy is sensitive to that, and they will be sensitive to their word choice, to their actions that could hurt some others. has the ability to discern sincere motives in others, closes his spirit to those who are insincere or insensitive. We know that there are some people that seem to like drama. They seem to relish drama in their lives. I don't understand it. I want to get rid of as much drama as I can. But there are some people, they go from problem to problem, and they really do seem to relish in it. Well, we start learning that after a while, and we may still be willing to help them, but we may not invest quite as much. We need them to turn that corner. We were talking earlier about the gift of mercy, and I was sharing that this is not my gift out of the 7. You can check this one off. But I can be patient to a fault with somebody who is trying. Maybe they continue to fail, but they're sincerely trying. I will help them. I'll give them. But if it's somebody that just seems to be welching on others or wanting somebody to just do everything for them, I don't have much pity for that. They need to set their heart right, or I just don't have patience with it. But I can be very, very patient with somebody truly in need who is trying, doing their best. I'll give them as much space as I need. So the person with the gift of mercy has that ability to discern sincere motives in others. Finally, enjoys oneness of spirit with those who are sensitive to the needs and feelings of others. So they pick up on who else has this gift of mercy, who cares about other people, and they feel a close kindredship with those. And that's very important. They support each other in that way. But there are pitfalls to the gift of mercy. Avoidance of firmness may appear to be weakness or indecisiveness. And again, these are ways that people perceive the person with the gift of mercy. It doesn't mean they are that way, but it's the way people perceive. And a phrase I say that sometimes people don't understand, perception is reality. It isn't real reality, but how you perceive something, you act like that's the real thing. It can be an attitude or an opinion you draw of somebody else could be wrong. But if you perceive them as something, that's the way you act towards them. So perception is so important because it really does drive us how we perceive stuff. And when we need to be sure we give a chance to talk to them, to get to know them, to understand. There's a great verse in Proverbs, a lot of great verses in Proverbs. One I'm thinking of is a person who comes to you talking about how they were wrong seems right until you hear the rest of the story. Basically, what I say. Somebody comes to you with a sob story, oh, they can make it sound like they're the most downtrodden, most abused person in the world. Then you kind of talk around and you find out that isn't the full story. They just show you. When I was pastor a long time ago and started out and had people come to me a lot of times about finances, I got to the point that it was basically worthless to try to counsel them on their finances unless they would let me know everything about their finances. They would come talking about how they were out of money and couldn't do this, couldn't do that, and nobody will help them. But then you get to know them a little bit and you find out, one, they may be covered with tattoos, whatever money that is, or they got the newest iPhone for $1,200, or they got a bunch of stuff at home that they don't have to live. I had a person make a mistake finally. She was a former church member, would regularly email me wanting $20 here, $30, $50 here. And one time she let out that one reason she didn't have any money is because she had taken her dog to the vet for his grooming. I thought, I'm not paying for your grooming. Helps one thing, but if you're spending money on grooming and don't have it for your bus to get to work, so that kind of closed that door a little bit. But people will do that. When I started pastoring, our church was right on Hurstbourne at I-64. You can imagine there, we got all kinds of people coming through for handouts. And boy, could they do a tall tale. They really sounded sincere and honest. And they had a policy that I could give them X amount of dollars just out of the till, and I didn't have to call a deacon and ask. I could give them that much money And so a lot of times I always did, not knowing how they were going to use it, but I left that between them and God. I don't have time to go police what they were doing. But people can spin a real good tale and make you feel like they're just the most downtrodden in the world. So a person can sometimes appear to avoid firmness, that they're weak and indecisive. Sometimes they may be. It depends on where they are in that continuum. They may appear to be guided by emotion rather than logic because of their strong sensitivity to the feelings and needs of others. And that really does take a strong balance, doesn't it? We are emotional people. Emotions drive us. Emotions are important to us. But we do learn as we mature not to let our emotions make decisions for us, to not make a decision when we're extremely exhausted, let's say, or we've had a particularly bad incident with somebody. Give it some time. That count to 10, in a sense, really does help. Pause, try to step back from the problem, let a new perspective come in, and then make a decision. Don't make a mistake at the point of emotion. So sometimes a person with the gift of mercy can appear to be doing that. Somebody without the gifts of mercy can look at a person. So, well, yeah, they're in trouble. They're doing this, and this. Well, that person with the gift of mercy is being understanding to them and focusing on that part of it. It doesn't necessarily mean they're ignoring the steps a person needs to take, but they're commiserating with that person on that level, hopefully first. Then, as they give that person that space, then they'll talk about the time. You remember in the movie we watched Friday night when the girl had broken up with her boyfriend, and the coach came in. At first, she started out relating. I know the hurt. I feel the hurt. But then she turned it around and said, now you tell me, what's he going to miss about you? Got her to refocus how things looked a little bit. She was able to do that. She had a relationship with her to where she would listen to her coach. That's kind of what it talked about. She first connected with her. She did know the pain. She'd been through that. She'd had that loss. But then she knew that it'd be wrong for Lizette, I think was her name, to give up everything in life, basketball, because her boyfriend dumped her. She would be giving up all of her ability, her talents, her opportunities. And so she encouraged her to focus on that and to keep going and not let him define her. So that's a good example of meshing that emotion with logic, and a person with the gift of mercy is good at that. Finally, a person with the gift of mercy is sensitive to words and actions that cause hurt, can appear to be taken up in others' offense. If three of you are sitting around a person with the gift of mercy and you're coming across and you're the one who's saying, well, you just need to get out and do so-and-so, and not really connecting to a problem, the person with the gift of mercy may call you down or may stand up for the person because they're focusing on that your actions are actually going to hurt the person. It's the wrong timing. Timing is so important of when we say something. I made a man in my church years ago really upset. He came on a Sunday morning. This was a retired person, didn't have a job. He was a busy, like all retired people, we're all busy, but he wasn't at a job all day. Well, anyway, he showed up on Sunday morning right before the sermon to tell me about something he didn't like. And I said, Jim, can we please talk about this later? I think you understand, but before a sermon, I really need to be able to focus on God's Word. I don't need to be distracted. Well, he got all upset. Sometime later, he told me that he had asked this lawyer if it was wrong for him to try to talk to me. And I'm going, my goodness. My point was, Jim, you had all week. You could have picked up the phone. You could have come by and seen me. You waited till Sunday morning to unload on me. It was really all my point. Not that I wasn't willing to hear him, but just not right now, okay? Boy, he didn't pick up on that. He talked to a lawyer friend about it, which, of course, didn't help my attitude at all. But he was a good man. He was a good man. I appreciate him. Loved him and his wife. But that's all I was asking. Don't hit me with stuff right before. And that's why, again, on Sunday morning, sometimes I see our little friend coming around. I got to go out the other door. She can set me off to where I can hardly preach if I listen to her. And y'all all know. And I do love her as a sister. I want to help her. I want to be sensitive to her, but at the right time. And Sunday morning is not the right time to hit me with stuff. So those are things about mercy. We need mercy. We need so much people. In other words, and also that verse in James, that the Bible teaches mercy, having mercy, that it's more important than the law. And I think that's what we see with Jesus with the woman caught in adultery. By law, those men were right. And Jesus knew the law. The law said that she should be stoned for having committed adultery. But Jesus preferred mercy over judgment. And that's what it's talking about there. We can't always be that way. People need judgment at the right time, but having that discernment to know when. And in her case, for everything we know, she turned her life around, became a follower of Jesus. She was one of the Marys at the cross, and that was with Jesus. So she did show that she received what he had done for her. But again, technically, Jesus should have said, pick up the stone and stone her. But he showed mercy and compassion. Rather, to me, that's one of the greatest verses in the Bible. Neither do I condemn you. Now go and sin no more. Just in that, Jesus encapsulated everything. He wasn't condemning, but he wasn't condoning. Okay, that'd be a good sermon title. Don't condemn, don't condone. And Jesus did that. He showed mercy towards her, but he did tell her, don't do that. And she changed her life for everything we know about her. So that gets to be a person with the gift of mercy. Now, here's some of the questions for you. And things, if you're running, I don't care if it's a church, I don't care if it's your business, I don't care if it's your home. Do you need everybody to have the gift of mercy? How would things go if everybody went over to this extreme area? And I hope you picked up what this is doing here. Because if you have a crowd full of people that have the gift of mercy, it may not ever address the problem. They're always just building people up. If they're not mature enough to turn that into, okay, now we got to change behaviors, then you got a mess. And you start enabling people. That's one thing you got to be careful with the gift of mercy. You can enable them in their problems. You can be codependent, these kind of problems. So we need that balance of all the spiritual gifts. And those are, to remind you, prophecy, serving, teaching, exhortation, giving, ruling, mercy. We need all of those to make the right decision to move forward. We need people, prophecy, proclaiming this is the truth, this is what God says. You need those servant spirits that will work to help. You need the researcher, the person that really digs into what Scripture is saying. You need that exhortation, encouraging people. These are the steps to apply what the teacher is telling you. We need giving. We need those people with the gift of giving because they're a conduit to help other people. You need administrators. You need people that see the big picture, that can help people discern steps to get to a goal. You need that. Not everybody can do that. And we need the gift of mercy. When people are hurting, it's a time for mercy. It's a time to put your hand around them. It's a time to give a hug if it's appropriate, and to support them. People need that. We need that mercy. If somebody with the gift of ruling deals with somebody, they're coming up with somebody really hurting, really having a problem. If they didn't think what their nature would be is to tell them, okay, you need to just get over it and do this to get out of it. Well, they do, but not at that moment. You know, that's the thing we're talking about with timing. Timing is so important to embrace somebody, but either for us to give them those steps or to let somebody else come into the realm to take over. We could refer them. Have you thought about talking to brother so-and-so or sister so-and-so about this? Because you know that they will listen and can point out steps to take in order to do better. So that's where it helps to know each other's gifts, to know where we are, so that we can refer to each other what that person's needed. Not all of us have all those gifts. Not all of us are going to be good at all those gifts. That's why God spread them out so that you have some in each group that are doing it well, and together we give the whole umbrella of care for a person. I believe that's true about churches. There are things that Campbellsburg Baptist is good, that does better than Campbellsburg Christian, and vice versa than the Methodist. That's why I really wish more our churches would work together to minister to our community, not trying to pull them all in here, then pulling all over there, not focusing on that, but focusing on what each one can do to help a person, and working together, again, to minister to our whole community. If we get somebody that we talk to, and for whatever reason we know that they'd be a better fit for the Christian church, we ought to say that, or the Second Baptist, or the Hills, whatever, if we know them. We ought to be sure what we want is that they're in a church worshiping, a good church, worshiping God. That's number one. We want to be that church, but we want them in a church worshiping God.